For the majority of people, transportation cost is the second biggest expense behind housing. Costs such as a car payment, insurance, gas, maintenance, parking, and other fees. And those costs go up dramatically when moving to a more expensive city such as Seattle. I decided to move here without my car and give myself time to evaluate whether it would be worth bringing with me or not. After about 6 months of being carless, I came to the conclusion that it made no financial sense to have it here with me, which meant it was time to sell it.
Here goes Gisele. Her final run. Oh, it's kind of sad.
Are you crying? Am I crying? No, I'm not crying. You're crying.
Any final words, Brad?
Gonna miss her.
Welcome back to the channel. This is Flonaut, I'm Brad, and in today's video, I want to talk about the car that I had, the overall cost of living differences between St. Louis and Seattle that ultimately led me to the decision to sell my car, and then my overall experience being carless for the past several months. Now, I understand that everyone doesn't have the luxury of going carless, but the goal of this video is to really get you to shift your perspective. Think about the things that you have in your life, big or small, that you could live without. And by doing so, how would that affect your overall quality of life? Some context for those of you new to the channel, I had a 2006 Acura RSX Type S. My parents bought it in 2011 for $15,000 and it had 25,000 miles on it. I owned it for 14 years, added $9,000 of mods, and drove it past 147,000 miles. Overall, it's been pretty bulletproof mechanically. It's lightweight, reliable, practical, high revving, and most importantly has a manual transmission. It always put a smile on my face. Driving to me is not about getting from point A to B. It's about the sense of freedom you feel when driving. Time not to think about anything else except the road in front of you, the sounds of the engine, and changing to the next gear. Since being carless, I started to think back to the days when I was younger. Glimpses of riding on the back of my dad's Schwinn, or riding my BMX bike wherever I could pedal with no destination in sight. It was purely for the wind on your face and pedaling so hard until you felt your heartbeat pulsating in your neck. No job to be at, no smartphone to distract you, and only the streetlights coming on to make you aware that it was time to pedal home. A car to me always just seemed like a necessity. Everything in St. Louis seemed to be a 15 to 30 minute drive away, and my commute to work was usually a 45 minute to an hour drive depending on traffic. So my parents were kind enough to keep the car with them to give me some time to figure out what I wanted to do. And after living in Seattle without the car, I started to really ask myself these questions. How much was my paid off car costing me every month in St. Louis? What is the cost of living difference as a single person moving from a studio in St. Louis to a studio in Seattle? How much more would having a car in Seattle cost? And how much could I save by not having a car? I came to the conclusion that it made no financial sense to have the car here with me. I put it up on Facebook Marketplace at the end of last year and sold the car for $10,000. Okay, so this might be boring to some. I hated math in college and I still found this pretty interesting to see a breakdown of the numbers for the first time. So in this sheet, that's what we're gonna look at. It's my same salary that I was making in St. Louis, and I'm moving from a studio to a studio, both in the heart of the city. The other thing about this sheet too is all of these totals that you see in these columns underneath our categories here are broken into monthly payments. If I paid for something in full in the year, I divided it out by 12 to give us that monthly payment, just to keep it consistent. And we'll start at the top here. So in St. Louis, my 401k contribution was 20%. So that's pre-tax. This is what I earned as a net take home. So this is what I had available to spend for the month, $43.58.80. This is what I spent, and this is the money that I had left. So $12.11.06 is what I had left. Now, where I'm getting this spent is we're gonna look at the same categories for each city. So housing, transportation, food and drink, phone, debt, and subscriptions. And then in Seattle, I did a guess of what my car estimate would be too, just to simulate if I were to bring the car, how much more expensive it would be compared to what I'm paying now. Base rent, just to call this one out, because the studio in St. Louis was a little bit bigger. We started with 540 square feet. This was the building utility, so this was just a fixed $30. I call that out because you'll see that increase a decent amount in Seattle. Along with a lot of these other things, housing is the most expensive one. And then I had the parking spot because I still had my car in St. Louis as well. Here's what I talked about. So I listed what I paid for the year, and then I just broke that up into our monthly amount. So that gives us a total of $15, $12, $25. And again, I'm just using a simple sum formula to pull in all these costs, and then this will pull in those amounts too in my comparison sheet. So jumping next to transportation, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, for most people, this is the second biggest expense, especially if you have a pretty big car payment. So $14.47 for the year, again, divided out, that's $120.58 per month. My RSX did take premium gas. Most things were a 15-minute drive away. In St. Louis, office commute was anywhere from 40 to 60 minutes, depending on traffic. I went about 3 days a week. And then random drives, I did a lot of those on the weekends. So some months were a little bit less, some months were a little bit more. I tried to get a good average based on credit card statements that I looked at. Maintenance, because a lot of us, if you have a paid off car, sometimes you really don't take that into account. Something happens with your car and you have to pay $500. Maybe you're not looking at that cost spread out throughout the entire year. And for those of you that have followed me, you'll know that I put quite a bit of money in modifications in my car. I left all of that out. That's above and beyond. That's purchases I didn't need to make. I also threw this one in here. So I didn't include this in the monthly cost, but I did have to replace a set of tires. That doesn't always happen. You don't have to do tires every single year. Those can last a few years depending on the mileage. You might pop a tire every now and then, so maybe that cost is factored in if you have to get a new tire or two. But there's that amount that it would add a month if I brought in the tires, but I didn't. Labor, again, spent that for the year. That's the monthly cost. $80 for the year in personal property. I know every state doesn't have to pay this. And then Uber cost was just when I go out to the bars, that was about $60. I did look at like June and July because I moved in Seattle in July. So I tried to get a fair comparison of maybe a higher spending month. So that total came out to $540.49 for transportation. Food and drink was $840. So groceries was about $300 a month. Entertainment really encompasses anything outside of groceries. So if you're going out to a restaurant, if you're going out for drinks, if you're going maybe to a movie theater, all of that I just lumped into one. And then phone debt and subscriptions, this was $255. These didn't change as I went to Seattle too, so you'll see that carry over. So if we move to Seattle, monthly totals. So my 401k contribution changed. As you might have imagined, the cost of living is higher in Seattle. So I needed a little bit more flexibility, especially in the beginning when I was buying furniture and getting things for the apartment since I sold everything before moving here. 401k contribution went from 20% down to 10%. Something new here that did get added last year that I'll talk about in another net worth video as a follow-up to the one that I did last year is my company started offering a ESOP. And if you don't know what an ESOP is, it's an employee stock purchase program where you can purchase stocks of the company that you work at. And sometimes you get some discount rates, and I'll get into more of that in the future, but they allow you to do up to 10%. I did the full 10%. That is post-tax dollars compared to 401k that's pre-tax. But by doing 10% to each, it gave me roughly almost the same amount per month. So $43.68.50 for my total earned, my net take home. I spent $34.52.15, and what I had left was $916.35. So moving through these pretty quick, I'll just call out some differences. Housing, substantially more, $2,097.15. We went to a smaller square footage apartment, but like I said, I explained in my other video when I moved here, gym was really important. Walking proximity to things was really important because I didn't have a car, so I wanted to be close to grocery stores and just daily necessities. And I like just being able to walk out my door to a coffee shop or a restaurant and not have to worry about always taking public transit or things like that. So I will pay more as a convenience charge to be in the heart of a city. Building utilities went up a little bit too. Unit utilities for water, gas, electric, sewer was a lot bigger expense here. Internet, pretty comparable. Renters insurance, pretty comparable too. $20.97.15 for total housing. Transportation. So this is where we substantially save, even though my housing went up. So public transportation, my work actually pays for what's called an Orca card here. Just to give you the range of what it would cost me, anywhere from $36 to $72 a month. You know, my cost is $0, but if they eventually stop paying for that for whatever reason, then that would get factored in. Uber, I just put $300 for the year. I do Uber to the airport when I go home. I go back to St. Louis twice a year. Sometimes that's covered by work if I'm going back for a little bit of work too. But if it's personal with tip, it could be $90. Just round up to 100 to make it easy. So $200 a year. I just guesstimated $300 if I needed to Uber anywhere else. Food and drink, the biggest noticeable difference was the grocery store, specifically meat. I ate a lot of chicken, so that price went up pretty substantially compared to St. Louis. At least that I've noticed. The grocery store I go to might be a little bit more expensive too, but that's the cost that I notice. And then Amazon essentially replaced my Costco purchases. I used to drive to Costco in St. Louis for like toilet paper and toothpaste and things that you could stockpile a little bit. So I use Amazon for that, just for convenience. I made a guess of about $50 a month based on those big purchases at once. This one was a little bit hard. Some of those items could last 3 months, some could last 6, but based on credit card statements, this was about the average that I got. Entertainment actually went down a little bit. Now, I haven't talked about this on my channel, but I did give up alcohol at basically the end of last year. I'll make a separate video on that because I feel like there's a lot to uncover there in general and kind of how that's played into effect of just quality of life. That's why entertainment went down a little bit, is drinks are expensive, especially in a bigger city too. And usually I drank cocktails or like straight bourbon or whiskey on the rocks, something like that. And that could be anywhere from $12 to $20 a glass. So you get a couple drinks and then you factor in some food on top of that. It stacks up pretty quick if you're going out once or twice a weekend. So $1,075 total for food and drink. Phone debt subscriptions stay the same. Here's my car estimate. If I were to bring my car, I wanted to know the percentage and dollar differences that I was saving and or would have to pay if I would have kept the car. A parking spot, because I would do garage parking at my apartment, $300. Insurance. So a couple of the friends that I've made here, the insurance seems kind of nuts depending on the car you have and all that, driving history, blah, blah, blah. I base it off the St. Louis one. This is an underestimate. Some of the people that I talked to paid anywhere from $2,000 for the year all the way up to $3,000 for the year. This would go up. I'm just going to leave it at this amount. Gas, I figured I'd fill up maybe half a tank once a month. The car is going to be sitting mostly outside of maybe going out for a cruise on the weekend or taking it to Cars and Coffee, things like that. Maintenance. So it would be sitting for the most part, but things could happen. I could pop a tire. I need oil changes still. This $800 might be a high guess for the year. So spread out over the year, it'd be $67 a month. But like I said, my insurance was a low end guess. I feel like this is fairly accurate just to give us a good gauge of what it would cost. Registration fee, I heard from a couple people that registration is pretty expensive out here. On the lower end, I've heard $500, so I just use that as an example, $41.66 a month. Parking are left at $0, but if I were to take the car out and park in a paid parking lot somewhere, I'm sure I'd have some costs associated to that. So that covers Seattle. Here is the most interesting part of the sheet, in my opinion, is the comparison. So breaking down housing, transportation, food and drinks, and miscellaneous was our phone, debt, and subscriptions. So housing was a difference of $584.90. That's how much it increased coming to Seattle. Transportation, I obviously sold the car and company pays for the public transportation card. So I'm saving $515.49 based on what I was paying in St. Louis. And you'll see this factor, and I'll explain the car estimate here in a sec. Food and drinks went up in Seattle, mostly because of groceries. I've been doing grocery store a little bit more than going out. I started to develop a decent friend group here, but in the beginning too, it was mostly just me kind of by myself. So I was going out to restaurants and things on my own, but maybe not as much as I would have been going out with buddies back in St. Louis, but still increased by $235 a month. And then our miscellaneous stayed the same for phone debt and subscriptions. So my actual comparison, spending increase and percentage increase without the car, my current situation. This breaks down my earnings difference, my spending difference, and my leftover difference. So spending increased overall by $304.41. And what I thought to be the most interesting part is I like seeing percentages versus dollars. Percentage increase of 9.67%. If I had brought the car, this ties into my formula down here. If I had brought the car, my spending would have gone from $304.41 increase to $858.65. Now again, some of my car estimates were lower, so this percentage would probably be a little bit higher than it is. I think this is pretty accurate, just guessing, but that was 27.27%. higher if I would have brought the car. I thought that was really interesting to see. If you think something looks wrong on a formula or something like that, I failed math a few times in college, so it wouldn't surprise me, but I did try to double check and look up things. My percentage formula, just so you can see, the breakdown here, if you pause it and look at the rows and all that stuff, that's the calculation that I found online to get that percentage. Hit me up in the comments. I'm really interactive. I would love to hear your thoughts on all the numbers behind this. So to wrap this up, beyond the numbers, what's the experience been like to go carless for the past several months? Well, I've had a car for so long, basically since 15 and a half, when I got my permit, shared it with a sibling before the RSX, that I forgot what it felt like to not have a car. And as I talked about earlier in the video, when I had the bike and going out with friends, when I didn't have the job and you had nowhere to be and no destination, that feeling of freedom that you get. Well, that feeling of freedom shifted to that therapeutic mindset that I created, taking out the car. That's what I always associated with just resetting. So by removing the car for a moment, I somewhat eliminated that outlet for that therapeutic mindset. So once it was gone, I just had to recreate that. That's what I've found since being here. So by having the gym really close, for me, it's just been walking on the treadmill. Now, not as exhilarating or the same as ripping through gears on some curvy road out here, but it has created that mindset of need a break, feeling a little bit stressed, whatever. Now I just go walk it off at the gym. And the bonus with that is it doesn't come with the financial burden that I've now found out even having a paid off car comes with. I think we get used to just paying gas and paying insurance and paying all those things. And I know for a lot of people, going carless is, maybe that's not an option. You have kids, you have a family, you probably need a car. But by eliminating those car costs, I now have a lot more money to experience why I moved here in the first place. Because to me, why move to a bigger city if you're just going to stay in your apartment and do the same things that you did in the city before it for a lot less money? Again, definitely share your thoughts in the comments. Side note, it's taken me longer to post this one. If you have just moved to Seattle, I'd also love to hear your comments. This winter time has really hit me hard in the afternoons and just being way more lazy than I normally am. Although I've really grown a love for the moody weather out here, it definitely takes some getting used to. So if you have just moved here, definitely comment below if you're feeling that too. I'll catch you on the next video. Thank you so much for all the support and see you later. So I don't know what the next video is going to be yet, but I am looking forward to see you on the next one. And it's been so long, I don't even remember what I normally say. I forgot. Shit, there's got to be one take in there that's usable. Close this and let's eat some rice.